In 2006, Dan Pinchbeck received a speculative research grant from the Arts and Humanities Research Council to research the concept of narrative in video games. But instead of publishing an academic paper, he made a game. Dear Esther was an unprecedented success, winning awards for storytelling and visual art, and receiving accolades from reviewers worldwide. Dear Esther was also a runaway commercial success, recouping its development costs within just 6 hours of going on sale in February 2012. Dan Pinchbeck takes up the story.
The idea behind it was to extend the research which I've been doing, which was looking at collating quite a lot of information about first-person games that were out there, and then from that we started identifying places that where it looked like there was really, really interesting content, really interesting design ideas, but they were so high risk they were very, very, very unlikely to ever be explored by industry. So we saw that a real strength of academia, of course, is that it doesn't really matter if a project kind of fails in some ways, provided it generates interesting data, and that was our cornerstone. So we made 3 what are called mods, which are freely distributed kind of plugins to existing commercial games. And we targeted different subjects with those, and we made these little games, and then we released them, dumped them onto the internet for players to get for free. And the really important part about it was we didn't kind of wrap it in the language of research. So we just said, here's these game experiences, you come back and tell us what you think about them. And we didn't actively go to people, we just put them in places that had very active forum communities, with the idea that we'd just track people's responses and it'd be very ecologically valid and everything else. And one of the projects was Dear Esther, which was specifically looking at the question of, there was a lot of debate about the relative importance between story and gameplay, and whether story was gameplay, and story was always seen as very, very disposable to gameplay. And so we kind of wanted to take it the other way and say, well, what happens if we dispose of gameplay and just have a game experience which is pure story and nothing else? Will that work? And we didn't expect it to. We thought probably we might get a few hundred downloads, and people might kind of probably send us some rude emails, but the way in which they criticised it would tell us a lot more about what players really thought about it. And actually, it kind of exploded, and within a year it had nearly 100,000 downloads, which is extraordinary for a mod anyway, and it already picked up an award. And around this point we started working with another artist who was a commercial game artist who'd kind of really fell for the mod, really liked what we were doing with it, but thought it could have a more professional kind of polish. And so we started working on a commercial version, which was done through the university at that point. And we hit a point where we started getting towards distribution, and we realised there were major issues with very, very, very hard to resolve contradictions between university charters and the kind of liability clauses that distributors have. So the university, in what I think was a very progressive decision, understood that it was better to release the IP for a game, have it come to market and get the associated benefits from that, than to kind of cling onto an IP which you'd never be able to exploit properly. So we ended up forming the studio, forming the business and taking the game to market ourselves. And it did extraordinarily well. I mean, it's up now at just over 850,000 units, which is an extraordinary figure. And it just showed that this research question that we started off with of going, but if you take risks, but if you explore stuff in an academic context that industry might not be able to explore because of the kind of pressures they're under, it's not just about it being a kind of an intellectual success. Actually, we can change the industry with these things. And it's amazing because it just comes back and it goes back to that initial kind of argument that we wanted to make, that academia doesn't have to follow industry, it can actively lead as well. And that comes from the AHRC looking at what I look back and read that grant and think this was a huge risk. It was such a high risk grant, and they took the risk, and it's brilliant that it's kind of come out this way, really.
Dear Esther was the launchpad for Dan's career in the notoriously tough gaming industry, and it helped him establish the Chinese Room brand, Dan's award-winning games development studio.
I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it. I've been folded along a crease in time, a weakness in the sheet of life.
Dan is now regarded as one of the first individuals to bring academics together with the gaming industry, and he's passionate about the opportunities these dynamic relationships can harness.
I mean, the Chinese Room was just a brand that we, had to come up with a name for a team for when we were releasing stuff, and we used it there. And again, the university were kind of incredibly generous in a way that they basically just let us up and leave with the brand. And obviously then it allowed us to develop the business with a decreased risk, but it also meant the university got that huge associated benefit of actually being hardwired into the centre of a commercial development. And we had one of my PhD students acted as one of the lead designers on the game as well. So it means that we've got a PhD coming out which is about the process of writing a high profile game, which I think is probably going to be a first. And research questions he had within that PhD are built into the design of levels in the game, so everybody that's playing the game is generating data for a PhD at the same time, and that's a really, really fascinating model. I think that's really interesting. I hope we're going to continue doing that. And the way in which it kind of works is that if a game is selling well, you tend to get reward payments from the funders, so we have an income stream coming back out of this commercial game, plugging directly into that process of actually doing that kind of industry-based research. So one of the things which I'm really interested in is that provided you can continue to be successful commercially, actually you're creating a sustainable funding stream for future research in that area as well. And again, when you go back to industry and say that, you can say, we're not going to come to you for money anymore, we're not going to look for those relationships, we're already generating everything we need. We want to have a much more peer-to-peer dialogue in a language that they speak, and it's a really powerful thing.
Looking ahead, the future's bright for Dan. His latest game has again been developed with an investment by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. Dan's original and pioneering take on bringing together video games and academia has seen him catapulted to the forefront of the gaming industry, with gamers now excitedly anticipating the launch of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, the Chinese Room's latest foray into the first-person video games market.
When we knew actually what we wanted to make, we kind of then went through this process of going, well, we want to look at this commercial angle, and actually we want to try maybe taking this out to a publisher as opposed to self-funding it, which would be a new direction to push that research question in. And Sony Santa Monica are a wing of Sony America that we'd kind of met them a few times because they'd been responsible for making some very innovative commercial content, games like The Unfinished Swan and Journey. And when we knew we were going to have to start talking to a publisher, and we'd already had quite a few approaches because of Dear Esther's success, we really wanted to look at who we thought was most closely aligned to that kind of idea that we had, that felt like a really nice stable flow through from the initial kind of AHRC project right through to commercial kind of launches. And really we just kind of threw all our eggs in one basket and dropped them an email, and then flew out to see them and just put it on the table and said, we think there's a really close alignment between what we want to do and the kind of things you've been doing, and fortunately they agreed, and so we are, we're now third-party developers for them.
And that relationship with Sony America is also paying dividends for the Chinese Room, as Everybody's Gone to the Rapture moves towards the next generation of gaming consoles.
We'd anticipated it would be a PC game on the basis that we didn't really have the money to do anything else, and then we reached a point where we realised we didn't have the money or the expertise, because it's a big title for us, as we've gone from being 3 people to 15 people. So between the fact that we kind of wanted that expertise and needed it, we kind of knew that we were going to have to push it out to a publisher. And when we started speaking to Sony, and they sort of came straight back and said, well, how do you feel about PlayStation 4? We jumped at it really, because it's an amazing piece of hardware. So in terms of the type of thing we did, there's never actually been a better time to kind of get, no matter how left field, kind of innovative games, to make them and to get them out there, because you're no longer in a situation where they're just going to have to be tucked away on a corner of the internet. There is a genuine opportunity to get kind of like console positioning and stuff like that, which is enormously important for academia, because actually suddenly there's an ability to have an inroad into that platform that just simply could not exist without this hardware a little while ago. So I think in some ways we kind of talk about this, we say that actually we've got ourselves into a position where there's actually very, very, very little excuse for academics that are interested in questions about games not to be exploring those practically. And that means there is the capacity, which I'm really passionate about, that if you can find a way to get that idea and to kind of realise it as a project, it means you start developing sustainable funding streams, which means you're actually freeing up research council money into really important projects that can't generate that kind of stuff. And that means that stuff which is previously niche or difficult to find, things like healthcare, social change, actually start getting funds that they desperately kind of need. So the onus is on us, I think, as academics, as individuals, to really kind of look to those opportunities and say, how can we get ourselves to a point where actually we can embed research and business really, really closely together, no matter how it goes for anyone else. I think the thing I'm most proud of that we improved is that doesn't involve compromise. You don't have to compromise your research integrity or anything else in order to do that.